So this is a quick guide based on my experience on how to run your own software development agency. I've been doing that for the better part of the last 2 years now. I work remotely. It's pretty much everything I could ask for. I very much enjoy it. One little thing before I get into it is kind of why would you do a development agency? What's the interest there? Personally, it's the learning to build with the whole learning to sell thing. I think it was Naval who said it. You learn to build, learn to sell, and those are pretty much the only two skills you'll need. And I think a development agency is a really nice way to do that because you literally practice the skill of building for other people time and time again, and you also practice the skill of selling as the business part of it. Honestly, I've made like all of these mistakes, so if anybody else is thinking about making a software development agency, I would just take this as a word of caution, really. These steps, they're what I would do if I were starting again from scratch, knowing what I know today. And I think I would have saved myself a hell of a lot of pain if I had listened to the advice that I'm about to give. Step one, pick a niche. And when I say niche, I mean technical niche. Now, you will see development agencies that are specialized in, for example, fintech apps, HR apps. Picking that kind of a niche is also super useful. But I would say before you even go there, I would say number one, just focus on a technical stack that you're strong and comfortable with. You don't have to be the best engineer in the world at it, but you just have to be able to feel comfortable with it. So you're comfortable providing stuff in that stack and learning tools adjacent to that stack, but especially when you're starting out. You might look at agencies that are big and be like, oh, well, they do all these services. Why can't I? Because they've been doing it for the past 10, 15, 20 years. Step two is obviously getting clients. From my experience, especially when you're small, everything is relationship based. Your relationships are going to be your make or break. That means go to events, make friends, be memorable to people. The goal here is really to make friends. You're not trying to sell. Do not try to sell to people because they hate being sold to. Everybody hates that. But if you make, like, let's say 10 friends at a conference, the chances that one of them happens to know somebody who needs a bit of dev work is pretty high. That's the platform that you have to start with, at least in my experience. I've tried outbound. Software development is incredibly saturated with outbound already. That's because it's just become incredibly spammy. You're much better off just making a couple relationships with ideal client types, because ideal client types will hang out with other ideal client types. And if you can niche down on a kind of client that you want to go after as well, that's going to be a really, really strong point. So for us, that's startups, early stage companies. That's what we go after. Then there's step three, which is do good work. I can't emphasize this one enough because app development, like software development companies in general at the moment get a really bad rep. And for good reason. Most of them do trash work. I've hired other agencies myself before. They're terrible. On the one hand, it means you have to do good work because it's not easy. That's why most don't. But that also means your life is way easier because the only bar you have to pass is just do the work properly. It's not that hard. Just pay attention. Have attention to detail. Look at what the client's asking for and just think a little bit about it and take responsibility for mistakes. This is a really important one. Even if something's not totally your fault, you take responsibility for it. And you say, look, I apologize. We messed up. You will be so impressed by the trust that builds with your client rather than trying to deny it or trying to make excuses for yourself. Like, don't make excuses and just own up to it. Focus on your client. Do the best you can by them. And that brings us to step four. So this is the part where you want to scale things and you don't want to become a glorified freelancer effectively. And this is where you got to focus on the talent that you hire. And that is as hard as sales. It's not going to be easy. You cannot grab 5 guys on Fiverr or Upwork and just expect them to be an A-player team. That's just not going to happen. You can find talent that's relatively cheap, but it's hard and you got to turn a lot of stones to find the right one. If you hire cheap and you hire poor talent, your company will suffer hugely. One of the most important things, especially in dev work, is maintaining a close eye on quality as you start to outsource things, because especially stuff like backend and logic stuff, that's where code gets a little bit choppier and it's a lot easier to write code than read it. And so sometimes you might feel a little bit lazy to review things and to double check the little details. That ultimately makes project outcomes way worse. I will say though, bear in mind, I've been doing this for like 2 years. It will take time and you have to be willing to put in those hours, and you got to be thinking in months and years, not in days and weeks and a couple months. It's got to be months and years. So yeah, those would be my pieces of advice. What I would tell myself effectively if I was starting off today, honestly. Can't recommend it enough. I think a development agency is a great business in my opinion. Like, from my experience, it's been really, really good fun, but you just have to be understanding of the fact it will take time. Anyway, those are the steps that I would take today from my experience, and I hope those are helpful to you. Let me know in the comments, and otherwise, take care.